Sakura's flower shop sat quietly at the end of a narrow street, where the sun seemed to walk a little slower and time too. It was a small shop, its windows draped in ivy, and a delicate bell chimed whenever someone opened the door. But in recent months, the bell had fallen mostly silent. Most customers had stopped coming, perhaps because of the quiet, not the peaceful kind found in cozy places, but the heavy silence of a florist who no longer spoke a single word. Sakura hadn't spoken since the funeral of her younger sister Ayumi. It was as if, along with the white coffin, she had also buried her own voice. That morning, the sky was pale and still white, like rice paper. The city was just beginning to stir when Sakura stepped down the 3 front steps of her shop and saw, once again, a single flower on the doormat, a blue anemone, placed gently, almost as if asking permission to exist there. Beside the flower was a folded piece of craft paper with a small hand-drawn sketch, a steaming cup of tea, the rising steam forming the delicate shape of a butterfly. She crouched, picked up the flower carefully, and pressed it softly against her cheek, as if absorbing the gesture through her skin. Then she unfolded the note. For the days when the world feels too heavy, beauty still insists. There was no name, no signature, no clue, but there was consistency. Every morning, without fail, a different flower appeared on her doorstep, always with a tender sketch, a brief thought, a quiet attempt at connection. It was strange how something so simple could reach something so deep. Since Ayumi's sudden and senseless accident, Sakura had moved like a shadow, opening the shop, watering the plants, tending the blooms she no longer felt were beautiful. But these flowers on the doorstep, left by unseen hands, were slowly cracking the walls she had built around herself. She began to wait for them, to wait for someone she didn't know, but who somehow seemed to know her. That morning, she placed the anemone on the counter, right beside the peonies that always reminded her of her sister. Then she pulled out an old sketchbook, one Ayumi had used as a child, and for the first time since the tragedy, she picked up a colored pencil and drew a small bird sitting inside an open cage. She left the drawing on the counter without meaning, just because she wanted to. That night, as she closed the shop, the sound of fast footsteps made her turn her head. Someone disappeared around the corner. She didn't see his face, only a blue knit hat and a worn leather backpack. Her heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was him, the one leaving the flowers, the stranger whose hands spoke in petals. But what she didn't know yet was that this stranger carried a secret that involved Ayumi, a truth that could either heal her silence or shatter it for good. And while the city slept, on a cold sidewalk nearby, a shadow sat quietly with a sketchbook in his lap, drawing her flower shop from memory, like someone trying to hold on to something before it slips away forever. The rain began softly, as if it didn't want to disturb. Thin drops slid down the leaves of the rose bush on Sakura's shop counter. She didn't open the store that day. Instead, she sat by the window, wrapped in a beige wool scarf that still smelled like the closet, or maybe like absence. She stared out at the street with hollow eyes, as if searching for someone she wasn't sure she wanted to find. On the ground by the door lay a wilted daisy. Next to it, a soaked note barely readable. The blurred words left room for imagination. Not everything that wilts is dead. Sakura picked up the flower with both hands, as if it were made of glass. It was the first time a flower arrived wet and wilted. Maybe he was sad too. Or perhaps it was a warning. Something was about to be said, even if no one spoke. Across the city, beneath an overhang where street artists left invisible marks, he sketched silently. The boy with the backpack and blue knit hat, known by few and named by fewer. Kaoru. Kaoru flowers that didn't exist. impossible blends of colors and shapes. But today, he only scribbled shadows, faces crying without eyes, gardens. Shrouded in mist, hands reaching for something or someone that was no longer there. In the bottom of his backpack, there was a crumpled letter. He reread it every day, though he lacked the courage to deliver it. It was the last thing Ayumi had written to him. A confession, perhaps, a request, or a goodbye. They had met in a watercolor class just before the end. She painted with a joy that seemed childlike, but hid cracks no one else saw except him. And he didn't know how to help. He had been with her that final night, watched her cross the street in a hurry, her feet wet in the rain, laughing at something he said, and then vanish. A car, a headlight, a scream stuck in his throat. He saw it all, and he couldn't scream for help. Since that day, Kaoru stopped signing his drawings, stopped talking to others, but not drawing and not blaming himself. When he learned who her sister was, the silent florist, he began leaving flowers, a cowardly way to ask for forgiveness, or to say, "I'm still here, even if I shouldn't be." That night, Sakura looked at the sketchbook where the bird remained trapped in the open cage. Beside it, she drew a second figure, a hand trying to reach the bird but hesitating. For the first time in months, tears fell from her eyes without warning. She remembered Ayumi's laughter, her footsteps running through the hallway, the strawberry shampoo scent filling everything, and how, in their last embrace, she had said, "I'll be back soon, On-shun." But she never returned. And now, a stranger left flowers on her doorstep, as if trying to sew back the torn pages of the story. Sakura didn't know if she was ready to find out who he was, nor if he had the courage to reveal himself. But the silence between them, heavy with guilt, grief, and tenderness, was beginning to speak louder than any word ever could. It was late afternoon when the golden light began to fall over the city like a thin veil. Sakura was arranging Lily in the window display, but her heart was beating out of rhythm. That morning had been different. There was no flower on the doorstep, no note, no drawing, just emptiness, and a strange silence within the silence. She tried to ignore it, tried to think maybe he was sick, delayed, or far away. But her chest tightened like someone waiting for an answer. That never came. Near dusk, the doorbell rang. For the first time in months, someone came in. She slowly turned around, her heart racing. And then she saw him. A young man holding a blue knit hat in his hands, tousled brown hair, eyes cast down, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wore a simple coat, stained with paint. In his hands, a flower, a red poppy. For a moment, time seemed to stop. He said nothing, just stepped slowly toward the counter, as if each step was a difficult journey. He placed the flower on the wood and, trembling slightly, pulled an envelope from his pocket. He left it there. Sakura didn't move. She just looked at him and recognized him, not by his face, but by an invisible trace in her memory. It was him, the boy who had appeared at the funeral, the one who stayed distant, never coming close, the one her sister had once mentioned softly. Kaoru, he understands me like no one else. She slowly reached out and took the envelope. Their fingers touched briefly. A shiver, a silent current. Opening the letter, she saw crooked handwritten lines, filled with restrained pain. Asterisk, Sakura, I don't know if you would hate me if you knew who I am. I was the last to see your sister. I left her alone. I should have stopped her from leaving. That night, I should have screamed, held her hand. But I stood still, she smiled, and walked away. And I carried the guilt. The flowers I left were my cowardly attempt to say, forgive me. You don't have to answer me, or even look at me. But I needed to say this, even if I don't deserve forgiveness. Kaoru. Sakura read it all in silence. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She simply lowered the paper and looked at him. Kaoru was about to turn away when she, with trembling hands, took the poppy and held it close to her heart. Then she walked to the sketchbook in the corner of the shop. Turning the page carefully, for the first time since the tragedy, she drew two figures, one holding flowers, the other with closed eyes, both beneath the same sky of petals. She lifted her gaze, met Kaoru's eyes, and then her voice hoarse. From long silence whispered a single word. Thank you. Kaoru trembled. A tear silently fell. And for the first time he spoke. That's what I've been waiting to hear. And so, in that brief and eternal moment, pain found a gesture, silence found a voice, and two broken hearts began to recognize themselves among the shards. The next morning, the sun felt different. No longer shy nor sad. A golden ray pierced through the flower shop's window pane and settled on the counter as if blessing the place. It was as if time itself had changed its rhythm or its intention. Sakura woke up earlier than usual. She put on her usual white apron, tied her hair in a loose bun, and for the first time in a long while, wore a simple pair of earrings, as if telling herself, today is a beautiful day. When she stepped down the shop stairs, her heart was already waiting, and there it was, a flower on the doormat. This time, it was a lilac hydrangea, delicate like a promise, and with it, a handwritten note for the words that come. Back even after winter, Sakura smiled. A small, quiet smile, yet full of light. Her fingers touched the petal with reverence. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, as if absorbing the flower through her very soul. That afternoon, she decided to return the gesture. After closing the shop, she carefully prepared a simple bouquet, lavender, daisies, and a single blue anemone, the same one he had left days before. On a small craft paper bag, she wrote in her delicate handwriting, You don't need to ask for forgiveness every day. I've already heard you. Beside the note, she drew something new. Two little birds on a wire of light, side by side, looking out toward the horizon. Then she walked through the city. The sun was already setting, leaving behind shades of honey and rust in the sky. Sakura wasn't used to going out at that hour, but her feet knew the way. At the street artist's mural were makeshift. Brushes left words, pain, and colors stuck to the walls. She saw him. Sitting on the ground, sketchbook resting on his knees, Kaoru doodled without hurry. She said nothing. She simply walked over and placed the package in his lap. Kaoru looked up, surprised, and then saw her, Sakura, standing there like a living poem. Calm, steady, beautiful eyes, with a brightness he hadn't seen the first time. He held the package with both hands, unsure whether to open it there or save it for later, but she smiled. One of those rare smiles that carry the kindness of the world. Then she pointed to the sky, where a flock of birds crossed the air, and softly said, There's still time. Kaoru didn't understand everything, but he felt everything, because there was a florist relearning how to live, and an artist discovering that even after guilt, one could still be touched by beauty. And there, in that meeting between flowers and silence, the sketch of a love was born. Night fell like a dark velvet veil over the city. Streetlights flickered shyly, and the flower shop slept with its windows half open, exhaling a scent of jasmine and longing. But Sakura couldn't sleep. Since the gesture the day before, her chest felt lighter and yet fuller. Something was pulsing inside her, as if Ayumi's memory had started wandering again through the corridors of her heart. And with it, a question still echoing. What really happened that night? Kaoru knew. And now she needed to know too. Not out of anger, not out of pain, but to understand what lay behind the flowers, the silences, the drawings. The next day, she waited for him. Kaoru arrived late afternoon, as always discreet, his gaze calm. When he saw her at the door, already with 2 steaming cups of tea on the table outside the shop, he knew something was about to change. They sat beneath the pink sky left by the sunset. For a few minutes, only the distant sound of cars, a falling leaf, and a chirping bird filled the air. Then Sakura lifted her eyes and whispered softly, "Can you tell me?" What did she say? Before she left, Kaoru held his cup firmly. His eyes grew moist. He nodded, then began, voice low and heavy with emotion. We were walking back from the studio. We'd spent the afternoon painting clouds. She said she wanted to paint the real sky one day. He paused, eyes lost in some distant memory. She looked happy, but there was a wait, I noticed. I asked if she wanted to talk. And then she held my hand and said, "If I'm not here tomorrow, will you promise to take care of my sister?" Sakura placed her hand over her heart, where the old pain flickered again. Kaoru continued. I laughed, thinking it was just drama. She always did that. But then she looked at me and said, "She's like a flower that doesn't like the sun. She only blooms when someone sees beauty in the dark. If I can't care for her anymore, promise you'll try." Tears slipped silently from Sakura's eyes, soft and quiet. Kaoru swallowed hard. I promised. But I failed. She crossed the street, and his voice broke. Since then, I've left flowers, not for her, for you, because I felt I had to keep the promise. Even without courage, even without words. Sakura looked at him for a long moment. Then, with eyes full of love and memory, she said, "You didn't fail. She brought me to you, and you have cared for me with every flower you left." And gently she reached across the table and touched his hand, a small gesture, but powerful. Kaoru smiled, eyes still glistening. In that instant, the silence between them was no longer pain. It was communion. And Ayumi, somewhere, beyond time, was perhaps smiling. Spring arrived without asking permission. The trees along the street where Sakura's flower shop stood began to sprout new leaves, and tiny colorful buds burst open in the flower beds as if announcing a new era. Even the air felt different, lighter, more alive. Sakura opened the shop as always, but with something new. She had placed an easel in front of the window. On it, a small handmade sign, "Living Art. Here, love is cultivated with colors and petals." Shortly after, Kaoru arrived, sketchbook tucked under his arm, still shy eyes. She welcomed him with a bright smile and said, pointing at the empty easel, "Today it's your turn to leave flowers." But now, with paint. He stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded with a smile and opened his paints right there, on the sidewalk. The world around seemed to quiet down to watch what was being born. A new work, a new life. As he painted soft strokes, colors that seemed scented, Sakura arranged vases, watered plants, and sometimes just stopped to watch him. There was something magical about this man who transformed pain into beauty, silence into color. When afternoon fell, he stood up, wiped his hands, and said with a calm voice, "I'm done." Sakura came closer. On the easel was a painting of the flower shop, with the window open, full of light. And there they were, hand in hand, standing in front of the shop. But the most beautiful detail was the sky in the background, where a flock of birds carried ribbons with names written on their wings. Among them, Ayumi's name in soft letters like whispers. She touched the painting as if touching someone's heart. Then, without overthinking, she looked into his eyes and said, "Shall we do this together?" "Do what?" "Live. Sell flowers, paint, laugh, love, be partners. Be something more." Kaoru smiled. Not the shy smile from before, but a glow that came from deep within his soul. I thought I'd never hear that. And I thought I'd never say it again. That very week, they hung a small new sign at the shop's entrance. Floor and core, flowers, art, and other forms of love. Sakura and Kaoru. And so, without grand promises or fairy tale endings, was born what the world needs most. A quiet, caring love made of small gestures, nurtured with patience and flowers. Ayumi may have left too. Soon, but she left seeds. And now, where there was pain, hearts blossomed.